Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we learn about Django, and I work on a Django app and walk you through some of what I know about working with Django, with something that I've been doing for many years. We're going to continue on a new feature this evening that is part of my homeschool application that I'm building, and I'm working on a bulk delete feature. Last couple of streams, we've been doing a lot of the behind-the-scenes back-end sort of work, the views, and actually the forms that go with it. And today it's time to move into the templates that are associated with that and make that look like it should for the application and hook it into HTMX to do some stuff. There were some things to check along the way as well. So you're free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. Happy to answer those questions. Otherwise, we'll just get right into it. Let's open up the code and start with where the feature is. Let's get rid of all this stuff. Start the web server. And from here, we can go to the app and check things out. So the feature that I'm working on specifically is an ability to delete a bunch of tasks that are part of a course. So looking at the application, this is a homeschool app, in case you've never joined in on the stream before. There are courses that are part of a grade for a school year, for a homeschool class, and there are tasks that can go with it. And what I want to be able to do is provide a user interface that allow users to check a bunch of boxes and then click a confirmation button and delete a bunch of tasks at once. This kind of adds some symmetry. There's a bulk creation feature that makes it easy to add tasks, and this particular feature was requested by a user who accidentally added a bunch of tasks and then had to go and delete them one by one, and that was kind of a painful thing to hear, so I want to be able to help that customer out. So there's the button here to take to a delete page, but as you can see, I clicked it and it did actually go to the URL, which you might not be able to see very well up here, but it's up there, but there's no UI yet. So we need to go into that template that already exists, it's just a skeleton, and fill it in with some of the stuff. So we want to go find the view. I guess we'll start there. And I think this is a function view, if I recall correctly. Yep. And so the template that we're looking for is the course task bulk delete template. You can see that it's literally an empty file at this point in time. And I'm trying to think of what template do I want to model this after. There's this UI. I want to have some kind of semblance of familiarity with other parts of the application. And to date, there's only really one part of the app that lists a bunch of things with a bunch of checkboxes by it. And that's a daily view page. So I think what I'm going to do is start with this particular template, and we'll use it to get in the main elements, and it's going to be missing a bunch of information. There's a bunch of information here that's not needed, but it should have at least the basics of the table that I want to be able to present on the data. So let's take all of this code and plop it here. And then, so we now have our bulk delete template, and you can see from the bottom of my editor here that we're on the right template file. So we're not going and changing the daily file by accident. And if we can confirm that by going back over here, and you can see that this is definitely not the right page. There's other stuff that's being presented here because it's different kind of context that's part of the view, but it's a starting point that we can work from. The daily page is one of these main pages that you see up here. It's actually the one if you click today. So it is trying to, when a user starts the application for the first time, they've newly signed up. If they start clicking around and they don't have any data in yet, there's a bunch of preconditions that they need to have filled out before the app becomes useful. So if they haven't filled those out, a bunch of these main UI pages kind of direct them back to this view that is guiding them along. So we don't need any of this stuff. And it's only appearing here because the data is missing for some certain things that are part of the actual view context. And that actually reminds me, while we're at it, let's switch the server to use the debug mode. And that way we can get the debug toolbar on our page and see what we actually have to work with in terms of data. So if we reload this page now with the debug toolbar, it's up here. You can see I can expand it. And then here's all of this information about the particular page, showing how many queries we're making. Really not that many at all, to get the right course information and tasks. And then we can dig into this even more and start to see what's in the context and so on and so on. It probably, yeah, here's the stuff that we really are going to care about in a little bit. We'll get to that shortly. The other thing that I want to be able to do is model some of what's here after the bulk create page. So I kind of, in the application, have this sort of breadcrumb pattern in the UI and navigation. So it starts off, if you're doing your school year planning, as you dig into and drill into the deeper levels of this application and the data structure, you present with school years and then a school year and then a course and so on. So if you can see that if I was to click on Science 3 here, you can see it says the school year, it says the grade that it applies to, and then the course name. And that is, hey Anthony, welcome. That is part of the UI navigation patterns that I want to have for the app, so that it's easy to go up and down the stack. But for the bulk creation that we're doing for this, I don't necessarily want all of this extra UI. Like the person is probably already into a mode where they're just there for that task. They've already clicked there. And so I want to guide them. And so you can see how that manifests on the add task. It is hinting that this is about the course you're going to change, but you knew you just clicked over here. And that's all the header really says. And then if we click on the bulk create feature, there's a similar naming convention. So I think what I want to do as the start of this template is to replicate this and say delete tasks, delete course tasks for the course. And just make sure that that's really evident. And then we'll actually do the table rendering. So we're going to start by deleting all of this extra context that is about that starting flow experience that is not needed. So we'll come in here and delete this stuff. And we're going to go to the end and find, oh man, am I going to get the right? This will be tricky. Do I get the right end if? So we'll refresh this page and hopefully get, okay. We're on the right path. I know I modified, it wasn't a template error, but there's a bunch of Django URL lookups in here and there's context data missing, so the patterns that are in there aren't matching. So we're dealing with a bunch of, the fact that I'm kind of shoehorning this template into this view right now, and we'll correct that in just a second. So let's go find where these URL calls are, which is where the code is going to be blowing up, and then we can clear those out. We can see right away that it's coming from this top section here. It's got a URL for this daily for date, and this error yesterday, context data, and yesterday is not actually in here. So for the moment, we actually don't need this version of the header. So I'm just going to delete that and see if it actually gets us to a loading template. All right, cool. So it still thinks that it's trying to look at some schedule or some context that's not there. And I guess now's a worthwhile time to actually show, like, what does this daily page look like that I've been referring to. So what I'm going to have is I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff on the top and have I'm going to steal from this title here and use this title, but say delete. And then I will probably have some version of this table and delete a column. That's kind of what I'm going for with the feel of this. So we'll do that. And then the actual flow at the bottom here is I want people to be able to cancel out of this and return back to their course page. There will be a cancel button here. And then there will also be like a a button to actually do the deletion, which I'll make scary and red and stuff so that people know that that's what's going to happen. We're going to hook it into HTMX as well, so that'll give us the ability to use some JavaScript and at the very least give a confirmation before it actually does the post request to do the deletion. So that's the level of fanciness that we're going to get to. I'm trying to keep the app pretty minimal on Flash right now, and I want it to be clean and simple and effective is what I'm going for. That's the value proposition of this whole site is keep the application simple, which I think I have in the marketing. Like the first word I tell people is it's simple planning. All right, so let's steal from different places, shall we? We're going to need our new title, so let's go get that first. And we'll take the course task bulk create page, if I can find it. Which one are you? I think it's this one. Yep, there we go. So we'll steal that, drop that in the header. We're also going to bring this in a level because it was outdented too much. And we don't need these links here for printing and showing other information. So we're going to keep trimming the fat until it gets to be the right structure. We've got the proper title now, so that's looking more like this, although we need to change it to, instead of add, it needs to be delete. And I may ultimately put some kind of description, paragraph of describing, like, here's what you're about to do. I feel like it's going to be a pretty common pattern that folks are going to recognize. So that might be overkill to like provide that level of documentation. But somebody might want it eventually. I think I'll probably leave it off for now just for simplicity. And I think we're done with this page. Oh, you can't actually see the title stuff probably, but there's a title up here. So we need to make sure that we change that on this, which is not right currently. And get my window back where it belongs. So the current title on my bulk delete page is way off. It says a certain day, or it says daily if there's no data, and none of that's there. So we want to delete all this stuff and change that. So let's change this to delete course tasks. And I'm going to refresh the page, and you can't see this particular one, although you saw the delete change there, but it's also up in the title. So we're on the right path there. Okay, now we're starting to get into the real stuff of where do we want to go and what needs to be next and what needs to be replaced. So let's get rid of this. We're done with that part of the top. We've got the title done. We're in the main block now. And then what's the guts of this currently is it's trying to iterate over schedules. And there are no schedules in the context. As I said, the context is a set of course tasks. So you can see here. So we're going to iterate over this and display all of the course tasks, and then we're going to display a checkbox for each one and give it an appropriate ID. And as a reminder, let's take a quick look at the view. So here was the course view that we have. And it's going to do some work on the post. And so the post is looking for a certain kind of form field name that's in there. So if we jump over to the form and look for the delete form, which is right here, the naming convention that I'm using for these tasks is to prefix it with task and put ID, the ID after that. And that's what's going to be pulled out for this data on the form. So that's what we need to be able to put in the form to make this actually viable. Okay, so let's let's do that. Let's grab all this and go to the end of this for loop. I'm not sure why that's outdented that way. And the schedule is, this is not about breaks, so we can delete this stuff. We're just going to keep trimming. I think that was, oh man, this endif. Is that right? Oh goodness. I think I'm messing myself up. Sorry. This is one of the things that, if I was better about this, I'd refactor this into multiple partials to make this a lot more digestible to see on this one page. And I should do that for the daily page. It's obviously too much template to fit in there. Yeah, and I can't even see it on a single page. So that's a good sign of like it's time to factor it out into chunks that are more readable. But I'm not doing that at this level. So I'm going to follow my cursor now to get the right level here. Actually, maybe before I get into the schedule, maybe we should think about the empty state. So if, let me see, can somebody get to this page from the course page if there's no tasks? I think the answer is no, because I think what we did last time is we on the course page, the course detail page, there's a set of buttons. The way we got to this was from a button from the course page, and you could only click on it if there was actually tasks available. So I'm not going to worry. I mean, it would still be possible to reach this page if there were no tasks, but I'm not going to expose that anywhere in the UI, so I don't even think we need to think about the empty state. The empty state, in my opinion, is something you do want to consider on most of the pages in your application. What happens when you have no data that a user cares about? I learned at my last job that, and this should be obvious, but maybe not everybody gets exposure to this, is that if there's nothing presented, the user interface just looks blank and empty. And so you really, you need to guide people along of like, well, if there's no data, what should you be doing? Like, how did you get here? And hopefully it wasn't by mistake. And if it wasn't truly by mistake, what should you be telling the user about what they need to do? But as I said, in this particular context, I think it would be a mistake if somebody got here because of the way we've designed the button to get to this page. So I'm going to clear out the empty state. And what that's going to do is it's going to delete all this stuff. So we're going to have an empty page now. So this is the experience. If somebody happened to come to this page and had no tasks, this is what they would see. And yeah, it's not a great experience, but nobody should ever get here. It should be an impossible state to reach without some URL manipulation. Okay. Next. Now we're at this next level in the for loop, and this is about schedules again. So we can delete this, and this time I'm gonna actually put the cursor on the right spot so I can delete the right end if. So we're gonna come down to the bottom, and it'd be nice if my editor was smarter and just knew about Django template syntax. That would be the best, but I don't have that. So we got to do it this way. Okay, so we shouldn't have broken things. And when I'm working with templates, you could do it with test code, but I find just working with the browser is usually most effective for me, is to make sure you're refreshing on a pretty regular basis. And that's just a good general tip in general. Wow, repetitive. That's just a good tip for doing software development. Constantly be checking little checkpoints here and there. I think the best way to do that, personally, is with some unit tests. So I do a fair amount of unit testing, and we did that on the form and on the view itself, but I do less of that with templates because it's more about the visual, and I find that the visual stuff is much harder to test. So that means that for this kind of stuff, I want to be in this constant feedback loop of, can I just refresh the page? Thankfully, using Django, which is a server-side template-oriented framework, makes that very easy thing to do. It's the page refresh is the way that you experience Django pages, and rather than a rich JavaScript client where you'd have to like reload the JavaScript, and yes, I guess a JavaScript client could route you to the right page, but it's more complicated. There's potentially more state involved, and getting to the right page might be different. All right, so we have now, I think we're getting pretty close to the table that we need. And yeah, so it looks like this is the header for the daily table. There is some JavaScript on here that is not relevant to this. I'm not actually going to make it. So it's something that you could observe about the daily page is that there's this box here, which will select all of the tasks for that particular student. I don't think I want to include like a delete all button for the bulk delete page, because my guess is that it's unlikely that somebody wants to delete all of the tasks. They probably want to delete some subset. I will wait for some customer feedback if that's not the case, but I'm going to keep it simpler to start and have just a simplified UI in that way. It also means less code. I don't have to write any JavaScript code that checks some boxes. That wasn't hard code to write, but it'll be easier to manage. So we can do what? This is going to be, I guess, the header for all of this. If I'm looking at this, there's actually, the schedule loop is actually a nested loop. So they're on the actual real daily page. This is broken out by student. And the notion of the student doesn't come into the modeling at this point in time. It's for the entire course, which doesn't care how many students are in it. So we're going to take out one of these levels of nesting and just have one table. So actually what I want to do is to delete this top section here that's for the student, and got this print stuff in it because it doesn't apply, and go ahead and delete this for loop. So let's remove that and then jump to the bottom again. And we've got this for loop and this closing div, and we don't need either of those anymore. I believe that's right. I think that gets us to the right level of for loops. Shouldn't be any change here, well, except for we've got our header now, which we're actually going to remove. But we're getting closer. We don't have any schedules, and we're not going to gate the buttons on a schedule. So let's go ahead and actually expose the button as well. So there's the save button. So the pieces are starting to come in as we get the context in. All right, next, what can we do? Let's go up on this whole section and pull it out. And I think, let's do that one more. Come on. Let's do that one more time, because that lines this up with the form. And as I just said, we don't need this header at all, I think. Do I want to include a header? Maybe I should. What should I say in the header? The header could be, well, let's look at what should we compare it to? Bulk create is a little different. So this is the bulk create page, but you can see that the way bulk create works is you have to put in a lot more information. You're not actually deleting everything or creating everything, so there's much more that needs to be added. There are labels on that. So maybe I need to say, maybe to get the right symmetry, I probably need the description label here, and then over the checkboxes, I'll put perhaps like delete ? Or something like that. But we'll come back. We'll come back to this in a minute. For the moment, I'll just comment it out so I don't forget it, and then we'll see that in a second. The name of the context that we want is we want to iterate on course tasks. That's what's in the context. So let's go ahead and change the loop to do that. And we'll call each one in there a course task. Now, that still shouldn't see it because we haven't used that data anywhere. But now we're at least doing the iteration. None of it's showing up because there are some if clauses that are guarding a bunch of this stuff. Man, there's so much in here that I forgot was in here for the daily views. Like, I might have been faster just to start from a fresh template. But, oh well, what can you do? We want to display this view when what? Okay, we don't want to gate this at all. So there's some logic in here that was trying to say don't even show anything if there's no task. But we definitely have a task. That's the whole point of this. So we can delete this and the associated, if there's an else or end if or whatever that goes with it, and continue to chip away at this layer and layer in here. I apologize. I know this isn't maybe as exciting as it could be. I didn't realize I was going to be having to strip away this much template logic, but this is the reality of working with apps sometimes. It's not always glamorous coding. Hey, Quatlim, welcome. Good evening to you as well. All right, so now we should have something here, I think. Ooh, okay. Yes, we're now running code that the template engine wasn't previously running. Yeah, glad you're able to make it. So it tells me that the template is still trying to have some URL that isn't in here, and here it is right here. It's trying to immediately render the detail page, and there's no course, so there's nothing to render. So what is that? Okay, that's the first column, which we can just delete. So let's just do that. So now we might need to fiddle with, notice that it's got some width in here. It's using a flex box and it's using width stuff. So if we take this out, we're essentially saying we're not opting for using the full grid size. We might need to do some adjustment later for the sizing, but for the moment, I think we can remove this safely. All right, let's see what happens. All right, interesting. I think this is what this really is. It looks like a gigantic yellow block, but it's really a bunch of underlines. So we are kind of successful here in that we're rendering every task row. And what you're seeing is the border on the table that I was using as the separator. So where this is showing a border here, that we're not actually including any of the data yet. So it's saying, hey, I'm just going to not fill that in. So all of it looks together in one solid chunk. Kind of looks funny. Did not anticipate that happening that way. All right. So we're getting there. I think the view of this that we want to render is this first one, because the template for the daily view, maybe it's easier to show than to describe. It certainly is. Let's look at it. So let's imagine that this is actually done. So we're going to click one task and we're going to save it. So it's going to be complete. This is the same daily view, but you can see that when there's a completed task, the button is not only checked, but the actual task itself is grayed out. And what that does is it's a visual cue, but it's not what we want. We want it to be the darker version here. So in our template that we're trying to clean up right now, we can actually delete whatever this one is. And I can tell you, just because I know the model, it's this elif branch. Because it's got coursework associated with it. Coursework is what tells you that it's done or not. So all of this stuff that's in here, I'm gonna have to delete it in chunks because I don't even know. That clearly that can go. Yeah, all of that can go in there. Same thing is true of there's this one, the no scheduled task. That's the second one that also has grayed out stuff. So we can delete this entire LF branch. So now we're down to this state. And again, we don't care to gar anything, so we can delete the end if as well. Now this would have been, hope you're seeing like how much easier this would have been if I actually did this right in the daily template and had it refactored out to partials, because you would have seen all of those little bits named as like, here's the thing you're trying to do, and it would have been a lot more condensed. You would have been able to read the entire thing. Like now that we're getting to the end of this process, it's easier to reason about the whole template and see what's going on here. You can see, oh, I've got a form, I've got a couple of hidden inputs, I'm looping over one big thing, and okay, there's displaying something in there. And that was hard to see beforehand. Okay, so next we're going to have what are we going to have? We've got, that's the description. And what else is in this daily view? What is that? Oh, it's got boxes. Okay, we don't even need this column over here. So we can also delete this whole thing. All of this is just boxes for actions you could take on individual tasks, which is not what people would be after on this page. They really, hopefully, are only on this page to see what are the tasks that I want to delete and are there checkboxes by them. So now we're down to it. We can go and we can change this. And if we want to get some data in here, we can change this to be delete that and get the course task. So now we've got the course task, we've got its description. We can do the same thing with the URLIs and the line breaks so that it will display properly. So that's good that we carried that over. And then the checkboxes will be here. There is a modification that we'll make that I'll talk about in a second, but let's just check and see what that looks like first. Okay, cool. This looks kind of funny because there's way too much space used. And this might be where we want to tweak things for aesthetic purposes, but it's getting the idea across. And I think if we had tasks that had more text, this might resonate a little better, but we're close. All right, let's go back to the bulk delete page and start to put some headers on this now. Or maybe we want to get the table the right size first. And then, well, since we're also going to do that, why don't we also... yeah, let's go back and actually edit a couple of these so that we have some more data in here. Let's go get some lorem, I don't know, lorem bacon. Bacon ipsum. Got that backwards. And once that is coming up, my internet has been rough tonight. I wonder how many frames I'm dropping. Hold on a second. Ooh, 8%. Sorry, y'all. I don't know what's going on, but my connectivity is not so hot. Okay, well, I was going to do some bacon ipsum, but you know, actually, this reminds me. There is, in Django, a built-in lorem ipsum. Did you know this? We can go and let's see if Google's working. If not, we'll do this from memory. Okay, maybe it was the lorem ipsum page. There is a built-in template tag called lorem, which will display a certain amount of boilerplate text. I guess we can't use this because I'm not going to just put that in the template. I actually need real data to back this up. So, but this is kind of cool. If you're designing a page and you wanted some placeholder text and you're doing it as a designer within a Django template, you can use lorem ipsum and give it some quantities, and it will just dump out lorem ipsum. And if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, lorem ipsum is some pseudo Latin, it's fake Latin, that is meant to be a placeholder text. But this is a fun little tag to know about. I don't use it much, but I imagine if I did more design work, I probably would. Yeah, there's also sorts of cool little nuggets in the built-in template tags. It's worth I recommend if you're working with Django, I would say spend the 10 minutes and look through, you don't even have to read them all, but you can look through this list and be like, oh, what the heck is that? That sounds cool. Because there are some cool things in here that are pretty fascinating. So check out that list is a good recommendation for growing your Django knowledge. All right. Anyway, we don't have that option right now, so we're going to come into this particular task and just fill it with garbage, I guess, because bacon ipsum isn't working. So I'm going to just do a little bit like this. Sorry, it's not very pretty to look at, but we'll copy and then we'll just paste a few paragraphs here. All right, so now we have one that's definitely filling things up here, and we can return to the bulk delete page and you can see what it's really doing. And this is actually, I'm glad I did this, because what it reveals is that the page, this column, and I could have inspected this, but this column is constrained here and you just can't see it. So if we look at a row, so what's happening is we have a flex row, which is we're telling to use the max 3XL width here. So it's taking up quite a bit of space. But then because we're only using the width of 1/12 and then 7/12, we're only taking up 2/3 of the available 12 size grid. So it's kind of constraining in this odd looking way where we've got all this extra white space. Now it already looked pretty odd when it wasn't filled with other stuff. But in a real course, like I can't of course bring up a customer's data to show you, but I have seen my wife's data, and for a variety of the courses, there's actually a fair amount added. Now, that's not always true. Some of them are quite simple like this, but there's a blend there. So I think what I want to do is, recognizing that this width is brought in like that, I want to do two things. I want to make sure that this is filling up more space. So I want to kind of chop this down, because if I don't also adjust this, then what's going to happen is that this is going to shrink down proportionally, and it will look like it's really condensed when that's not really what we're going for. Hey, the programmer, welcome. Working on a template here today, so glad you're able to join us. Twitch tells me you're a first-time viewer, so thanks for tuning in. All right, let's get back to this and make some of those adjustments to see what it will look like when we actually have some proportional stuff put in here. So I'm going to try taking it down to, instead of 3XL, let's see how XL looks like. And I refreshed my chat, not the actual window, so oops. That's starting to feel like the right spacing. Maybe I might even try large. Let's try large. And this is one of the things I love about Tailwind. So if you haven't used Tailwind before, I definitely recommend it. Tailwind CSS. The cool part, in my take on Tailwind, is that you work on the HTML. You learn some patterns, and you learn that you can basically work in the HTML itself and do all the design you want. You basically never have to touch CSS files unless you really want to make some custom elements and stuff. I find it to be a really great framework to work with that makes it for rapid iteration. Tuna Hobby, what's the advantage of using Tailwind over Bootstrap? Well, I don't get me wrong, Bootstrap is pretty cool. especially if you are not as experienced with CSS. So what it's the notion of what the two tools are trying to do. In Bootstrap is trying to give you some components, right? So let's take a look and see if we can bring it up so that others that may not have seen Bootstrap can know what we're talking about. So Bootstrap, by its design, is meant to give you these components that you can work with. You put in some divs, you add some certain classes, and Bootstrap gives you these pretty consistent looking things. So it works to make a reasonable interface in a very quick interval, which is really cool. It is really cool as long as you're willing to work within the parameters defined by Bootstrap. When you start to move to some customization of Bootstrap and you want it to have a different look and feel, then things get a little bit harder. They're not impossible. I've used Bootstrap and used it with great success in certain apps, but it certainly is a different kind of workflow for modifying, because they want you to work with these different classes. And so that's one element. The other element with Bootstrap is that you kind of have to remember, or you have to learn, I would say, some of these structural ideas. So what do I mean by that is look at this dropdown. The dropdown has multiple things to it. You not only need the dropdown, but you also need to add in the dropdown menu, and you need to add in a dropdown toggle potentially. And all of these are signals to Bootstrap to do certain things. Now, maybe you just copy this and it's fine, and that's all good. But that requires a bit more. You have to think about the relationship of CSS classes to each other. Now, let's contrast that with Tailwind. Tailwind is what's considered a utility-based CSS tool. And what that means is that you get all of these little tiny classes that you're adding to your CSS, like you can see added to this example here. In fact, let me bring this down, because I think what it's doing, I thought this used to animate. Oh, yeah, there it goes. Okay. Yeah, so what's happening is the text is changing up here, and it's showing how like those little changes affect the overall design of this. So what that means to me is that Tailwind is like this little composition-based model where you build up the thing that you want, and it almost feels like digital clay is maybe the best analogy I can think of, where it's about kind of shaping the user interface stuff into what you want it to look like. And what you end up having to learn is like, what are the tools that I have? Like, I have background colors, and I have width and height modifiers, and that start to internalize the scale and the spacing that comes with these, because there are very strong conventions that come out of it. So this is width 32. A 32 is bigger than a 6, so it's going to be, and it's proportional. So you start to get a feel for, like, this is what I'm doing. So when I'm over here and I'm fiddling with the max width, and you start to learn these conventions, and you can pretty easily, or in my opinion, easily ascertain what it's trying to do is, okay, I'm saying that I have a max width. And I know from using Tailwind that there is small, medium, large, and then it gets into extra large, 2XL, and multiples beyond that. So once you have internalized some of that basic knowledge, you have this whole toolbox to work with. And what it means is it allows me to have this really rapid flow of, hey, you know what? I didn't like that large and how that looked. I'm going to go change it to an extra large and just see, is that right? And so I feel that it's a lot more adaptive to what I need to do when making UI stuff. So that's my thoughts on Tailwind versus Bootstrap. They're both good tools. They have different usage of why you might want to use one versus the other, in my opinion. All right. So what's very obvious right now to me, though, is that this is way wrong in terms of sizing. So let's come in here, and I do feel like the large is probably about the width that I want on this page. I think that's a reasonable amount, since what we're focusing on is two major elements. One column is going to be just the checkboxes, and then the other is going to be the description that I'm trying to show for what to delete. So we want to fill that in appropriately. Because it's using a flex box and a flex row, the internal divs are telling me that this is the width. It's on the grid system. And so the width of 1/12 is a 12th unit of that 12 size grid, and the other one's using 7 of the 12. I want that to fill up to that entire large space, so we need to change this math here to be to use that full 12 grid. And so I think what I'll try, and again, we're gonna play with this. Let's try 3 and 9 and see how that feels. Should, when we're done, now it's using the whole thing. I feel like, so this is just where my design aesthetic is starting to come into play of when I look at that, what do I think? Like, I get the sense of, to me, this 3 is overkill. Like, because I think the other thing that's going to happen is I'm going to resize my window to cover up my chat for a moment. You can, like, well, I guess it's not really messing with that because we've max width on large, so that's maybe not a problem. But it is still feeling like there's too much spacing on either side. But at the same time, when I saw the 1, it seemed too tight to me. So let's try 2 and give the other one 10. Now, I will say, Tailwind's pretty cool. You can also do different proportions. So if you want to do 3/4 and, you know, like we can do our math, right? And we can say this is 1/6 and this is 5/6. So you can reduce stuff. I personally prefer to stick to the 12 unit grid and give myself maximum flexibility for when I inevitably add another column and have to fiddle with that. And I don't want to fiddle with all these numbers. But that's just personal preference. Okay, stateful components. Yeah, that's a good question or a good comment there. I don't do a lot of JavaScript components and stuff. So one of the things that I don't know, and I'm sure many out there do, and it'd be a good question to ask on Twitter or something, is how well does Tailwind work with the component model of React and Vue.js and friends? I imagine there are certainly ways to do it, but I don't know off the top of my head. The other thing to note here is that Tailwind by itself is like if you were to go to the website, and I think they might even talk about this. So let's take a peek at the documentation. And if you install it or use the CDN, where does it talk about it? I'm looking for how much the size is. It might be with the information here. Yeah. So Tailwind is not a small library. So what they've done, the authors have done, which is an interesting technique, is they essentially generate all of these little utility sizes. So all these sizes that you might want to use in your templates. And they put them all out there. They're all available, and the numbers can be quite large. Like if I search for, if we look at the width, for example, and see what's available, there are tons of these little classes. And there are variants of all of these things because it also does responsive design. So what happens is all of these little classes also can work with SM : in front of it if you want to like target specifically a small width device. And the effect of that, as you saw from here, is that it's 3 megabytes of CSS when it's uncompressed, which sounds ginormous and is. So why would anybody do this? So what they strongly recommend and I think they even comment on it here, as part of the build process is to use a tool that is called, I think it's Purge CSS, I believe. So what you can essentially do is you can tell your build process for your Tailwind, if you choose to use it. You can tell it like where are my templates? Where is actually the stuff that's using the CSS? And it looks for all of the CSS classes that are actually in use. And then it goes through the build output of that full 3 megabytes of raw and trims it down to the actual stuff in use. And you can see this comment here, that which has been true in my experience, although mine might be a little bit larger, but if you follow their best practices of using this build tool, you can get a very, very small CSS file. And if you aren't super familiar with why that's important, I mean, it's not only important from a network perspective. You don't want to have to transfer a lot of CSS over the web to your customer or your user, however you like to think of the people that you're trying to make a website for. You don't want to have them download that, but it's also super important because CSS in particular is affecting the entire ability of the page to render. So the browser doesn't know, it doesn't have the rules in place yet to decide how I'm actually going to lay out this chunk of HTML. And so when it encounters a CSS file in the HTML, it blocks pretty hard on that design or on that page until it has that CSS file and is able to parse it and able to start to apply the style rules that are specified in the CSS. So the performance of CSS is really critical if you want to have a very responsive application, which is why you want to follow. You don't necessarily like using the CDN is good for testing out Tailwind, but if you're going to put it in a long-term project, definitely follow some of their instructions. And thankfully, their instructions are pretty easy to follow. In particular, there are a few different ways to do this depending on what you're using. Like if you're using React, you probably have to do something different. For me, I use their Tailwind CSS command here that's available that you use with NPX, and I've added it as part of my deployment process. And so it will create the Tailwind file that I need ultimately. So whenever I do a deploy, it automatically checks all of my templates and makes sure that I have the right stuff. It's been a pretty successful experience for me personally. Okay, so that was a little sidebar on Tailwind. Let's see how this actually looks like with the modified spacing. Did I actually refresh that page? I don't know. No, I didn't. Okay, that feels a lot better to me. Oh, you're welcome, Toon Hobby. I'm glad I can provide some info there for you. Okay, so this page looks pretty Spartan, but I do feel like it's in the right ballpark. Now the save button is way the heck out here. That needs to change. So let's bring that in as well. Do I work on this project off stream? I used to. I don't anymore. Time and life and kids and all that stuff basically means that what you see here is what I get. Maybe if I go on vacation or something, I might do it. But I've just found that like the pace I'm at and the goals that I have for this project is to make this work for my spouse and the small set of customers that I have. But I'm not. I had maybe grander ambitions that I needed to initially. So I used to work on it more heavily, but I've kind of backed off a little bit, and I'm okay with that. Okay, so we've got now the large, so it's going to bring the save button way over here, if I did it right. Come on, there it goes. Okay. We might need to rework that anyway, because I think as soon as I introduce the second button, this style doesn't work right. Because, well, maybe it will. I don't know. We can poke around with it, because I want a separate button that is actually a link that will take you back to the course page. That's the goal there. so that if someone decides, you know what, I actually don't want to delete anything, that they can just kind of cancel. All right, so now I think we're ready for our header row. So let's uncomment this. We don't need this top checkbox because, as I said earlier, we're not going to enable the ability to check all of them at once. I want people to, I don't know, I just feel like they should be a bit more selective rather than accidentally deleting too much. But that's my stance for now. Happy to change it in the future. Okay, so we've got, what do we have? We only need 2 columns because there's only 2 columns down here. And actually, while we're here, let's bring that out. And let's change this to the 2, and let's change this to the 10. Nope. We're going to use this one. We're probably going to have to mess with this because it looks like I think I did for that daily page, I did some custom tweaking on the margin and the padding, which we may not want anymore. So we'll have to fiddle with some stuff. Let's put the width to here and delete this one and say, instead of complete, let's say delete. And let's replicate this one, change it to 10, and then say a description. And then I think we can get rid of this. We don't need this hidden input either. That's from the other page. Okay, I think we're starting to get there. How's it gonna look? Oh, not good. Okay. So what's going on there? Why is it pushed all the way over there? That's not right. Text center, that's what's wrong, maybe? Yeah, okay. So there's a couple things wrong. We're still on the max 3XL, which is too big. We need to drop that down to large. And really, I think if I did this better, I would have had one div wrapping this whole section. Should I do that? Because what you might have observed is that every time I want to change that width, I have to change it in 3 spots. So if I had just wrapped it all in a single thing, it might have worked, but whatever. So that's going to bring that way in. Still some weird stuff going on here. We don't need a fixed width. So that this width 20 at the end, I think, is overriding our proportional width at the beginning. So let's delete. I had all this just tuned just so for that daily page, and that's what it's causing that. So let's take off those things and see what the impact is. Okay. But I did remove some padding there. So what was the padding that was on? All right, PY2. Let's keep the PY2. Let's delete the negative margin and the fixed width. So I should just space this out a little bit. There we go. Whoops, I didn't do it to both spots though. PY2. Am I a professional software engineer? Yes, I am. During my day job, I work for a company called Included Health, which was actually just announced this week. It's a new name as of 2 days ago, formerly called Doctor on Demand, or it's really the merger of 2 companies. So at Doctor on Demand, now Included Health, it's a telemedicine company. And so I do a lot of Django development there. I'm a software architect there, so I have a lot of responsibility thinking about the structure of the system itself. And but I'm certainly capable of doing these side projects too. So some of this is knowledge that I bring to bear from my work at Doctor on Demand and a previous job, but also I've just done plenty of study of Django specifically. All right, let's see how this looks with both of them having the padding that they're supposed to. There we go. Okay. So now that we have this, I feel kind of weird. The description still feels a little weird being way over there. Especially like, look at, okay, so over here on the bulk create, we've got it. There's another thing we could do here. I think what I want to do is, let's play with some stuff. I think what I want, Nakura 2010, thanks for the comment there. Let me read your comment, see what you have to say. Oh, okay. Good luck, the programmer, on your homework. Do I believe Excel's VBA is a good way to get into programming? I honestly, well, okay. You gave the comparison to C or C++. Between Excel VBA versus C or C++, I think VBA is absolutely going to be a better way to at least understand the basics of programming. C and C++ are pretty notorious in their learning curve, and they are great languages to learn. Don't get me wrong. I think if somebody is a developer for long enough, they probably need to read Kernighan and Ritchie's C programming language. That's a great book. It'll teach a lot about, like, you'll start to see the underpinnings of so many programming languages. But C itself is very unfriendly to beginners, especially as you're having a hard enough time maybe learning variables and for loops and things, and then they throw in pointers and all this other stuff that just kind of makes your brain explode. But it is a good tool once you get there. So, good question. I don't really view Excel as like a programming tool. So they're conceptually pretty different models. But I do think, programming, the basics of programming, if you're dedicated and prepared for challenges, it's certainly not easy. I think anybody who thinks that going into programming is an easy endeavor is probably in for a bit of a rude awakening. But it is a worthwhile challenge, and once you internalize some of the core concepts, it does translate to a lot of power in your life. So I don't know that how much you could say you would know after 2 weeks of doing programming. I think maybe Excel is a very friendly experience to get going and stuff, and learning some formulas and that kind of stuff. Programming is a bit more abstract. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I unfortunately have never done any VBA programming, so I don't know. I am, you're on this stream. I do Python development, so I think Python is a fantastic language to learn. If you're purely like, I want to learn programming, then Python is a really great tool. Analytical algorithms. Yeah, especially Python is super popular in the data science world. What can I recommend to you? Like, I think maybe check out this site. This is freecodecamp.org, and disclaimer, I've not used this myself, but I have heard many good things about FreeCodeCamp as a learning tool, and you can see they offer a lot of JavaScript stuff, but based on what you've stated, there's data science kind of stuff, and the data world and the science world heavily uses Python. So that is a good tool. Interesting. You spoke with a test engineer. That is interesting advice from that engineer. I don't know why they would recommend learning C before and sticking away with Python. Some people get pretty opinionated about stuff. As you've seen me say already, like C is a great language, C++ is a great language. VBA is I'm sure a good tool. People say it's kind of limited at some point, but you can do a lot with it. But I mean, where I would disagree with your test engineering company teammate is that like Python is massively used in scientific computing. So if your goal is to get into analytics and analytical analysis, then Python is a really solid option. So I would say maybe check out Free Code Camp, and yeah, it's a cool source. They have a whole path on, and I don't have it up on me. Sorry, but there's a whole data science path that you can learn from. Okay, coming back to the template for a minute though, let's flip some stuff around. So I think what I'm observing here, what I like about the way that I did this bulk create page, is that this description already has the spacing. It already has that like breathing room that I would desire. Whereas if you look at this delete course page, I've kind of stacked everything towards the left side of the screen, and that feels wrong. And I think what I want to do is flip this around. So let's put the task as front and center on this, and then give the delete column, put it at the end. Thankfully, that's pretty simple to do now that we've already got everything cleared out. Okay, yeah, that feels way better. I will leave this one centered because it feels right over the checkbox there, which is kind of in the middle. But what I'm also going to do is push the description over to the left. We can do that by coming up here and taking out the text center. Let's see how it feels. Okay. I might want to nudge it a little bit. No, so take a look. There's the descriptions here, and oh, absolutely. Have I ever heard of self-taught programmers making in the world? Yeah, totally. I'll tell you a story, I guess. So I grew up in a neighborhood in Massachusetts. One of my neighbors down the street was a good friend of mine. He's probably 2 or 3 years older than me. Hung out with him all the time. And this is goodness, 20 plus years ago. So time's relative here, and how he learned is a little different, but the general idea is similar. And what he did was just learn on the side as a student, frankly, and learned a lot of C and C++. Now, granted, at that time, Python wasn't really like a thing. I don't know what he would have done if he had been in the same boat in 2021. But he learned programming languages on his own. And he, to my knowledge, didn't get a college degree, kind of just was programming and got into the workforce through that path. And he's doing very well for himself today, is my understanding. In fact, there's a tool out there. It's called memcached, and it's a distributed. It's a key value storage, which may not mean anything to you if you're new to programming, but to some other viewers it might mean something. It's a very, very popular tool. It's used all over the world. Wildly popular tool. He's actually my friend, my neighbor, is actually the maintainer for this project. So, really sharp guy. So, I absolutely think that self-taught programmers can make it. Now, maybe you need more structure in your life. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're self-motivated and can get going there. So I wish you luck on whatever you're doing. There's tons of good resources out there. You have the advantage of it being 2021, and there's so much available. There's almost too much. But yeah, there's definitely a path to it. Yeah, I would say, freelance could be good. I personally, I have to support a family, and if I was in your shoes and you had a family, or you clearly have a spouse, um, maybe learn it on the side and try and pick up some freelancing here and there. There are places where you can get some kind of first gigs, and you recognize that early in your software development, you may not be able to command much of a rate, but you could look at what is it, Upwork? Is that right? Yeah. So Upwork is a pretty popular site for developers to get out there and make their services available, and you kind of tell what rate you're at, and get some clients under your belt, and get some experience, and try that way. That's a path that many people go down. So good luck to you. All right. Man, we're template, huh? Still working on this thing. We're getting close. I think I'm almost where I want to be. Am I a freelancer? No, I wouldn't. So I'm a full-time W-2, and that's a United States term. So a full-time employee, and I spend my work days working for this company, Dr. On Demand, included health, and then this side project, what I do on Twitch here, and what I do for my family and the small group of customers that I support, I wouldn't put it on the level of freelance kind of stuff. Okay, now let's finish up this template. I think we've got the design kind of dialed in to about where I want it. Oh, there was this one point. I think I want to nudge the header here just a little bit so that it lines up with the lessons here. I think that from a visual point of view, it's just irking me some. So I think I can change this to be, instead of PY, so the Y is just the vertical, you can say P2, and that's going to do the horizontal as well, which I think should bring in the description to the size that we want. Boop. Yep, there it goes. Okay, that feels about right to me. So we've got some checkboxes. They aren't going to do anything yet. We have the save button. Still, we need to clean that up. We need a cancel button. And we also need, like right now, if I inspect these things and look at the actual generated template, you can see that what's in here as the task is not really correct yet. It's got this is what would be submitted. If we clicked the submit button and submitted this form, all of the fields would be task dash dash, which is not even close to right. And that's because we haven't connected the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this one. So part of this, the reason for this hidden one is in that other daily view, I need to send both. That's not really the goal here. I just need to send whatever is actually deleted. So we can delete that. We can have this be man, is that what I want? How's that going to work? That's curious. All right. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to change this to be the course task ID. Actually, we don't even need this class. This is for the JavaScript stuff. So this isn't needed. What we do need is the name. So when you're doing a form in HTML, what you're actually submitting to the server is what is in this name attribute, which is confusing because there's also an ID attribute that you can add, but it's not what gets submitted with an HTML form. I always found that like really perplexing. So we'll put in the course task like so. We'll delete everything after this because we don't need the dash dash. We've got a checkbox. That's going to stay the same. And that feels right. So now if we come over here and refresh the page and look at the actual HTML markup with the inspect, you can see that the tasks are given the proper ID. And this is the contract that the backend Python code is going to be working with the browser on. Like I wrote that backend code such that it will look for things that follow this pattern, where it's task dash followed by the ID. And that's what it's after. So this might even be good enough to like actually work at this point, now that I think about it. There's still more work to do to change this to be the right thing and have a cancel button, but this is going to work at a basic level, I think. Let's test it out. And we can also observe what happens in the network as well. So let's delete task 2. I've got this enabled so that it's going to record. It should record the log. So what we're going to see is when we click the save button here, it's actually going to perform the HTTP post request. So it's going to submit the form data. And that form data, the only thing that's going to be in it is the hidden CSRF token. That's for security purposes. I'm not going to talk too much about that tonight. As well as this one checkbox that's checked with it, which will have the task ID and that on value. And that will be enough for the view that's handling this to delete that task. And it should send us back to the course page if I did it all correctly. So let's try it, see what happens. Ooh, interesting. I absolutely should. So something happened that was not right. Because it says, sorry, you don't have permission to delete the selected task. That's absolutely not true. Because here I am, I'm logged in as this user. Something is off. Fun. Okay. Let's see what we actually submitted. So, as I said, I'm recording this, and it's going to show what actually went to the server. And we can check out the request. And here it is. So it's got the task, and it had the dash with the identifier. That's the ID. And this is the task ID, I'm pretty sure. Let's spot check a couple of these. So there should be different IDs. Yep, there's a different ID. And lesson 2 should have that ID that we just saw. Boop. Yep, 15X7KJN. All right. So why, oh why, did it not work? I think I want to get this right before I move on, because I want to have the basic functionality should be right, and it wasn't. So something happened along the way. Let's jump over to the code. This is the course's form. We're going to find out where that error, so that I wrote that error message. That's definitely from me. And so something triggered. So it hit this line right here. What did I do? So there should only be, this list should be just the task IDs. And you can see it's going through the data that came from the form and is looking for anything that started with task dash, which we did. And then it's got that as the task ID. Did I, Aha. Okay. Here's the problem. I wrote this with the expectation that I was going to put the ID as the value. And instead, what I'm sending as the value is the word on, which is not right. So let's fix that. So with a checkbox, you can either, by default, if you don't do anything, I think it might be browser dependent, but if you have a box checked, the form data will send some kind of indicator that this was included. And I think it's usually the string on, O-N. I was a bit more explicit with that by having the value be on in this particular template. But as you can see, the way I designed this, I'm taking advantage of the fact that you can send whatever value you want. So I'm going to actually send the ID as the value, and that's going to what's going to be in here. I think that's what's wrong here and why it didn't work. So let's try refreshing the page. Okay, and let's inspect this checkbox again. Now we have our value as the ID. So now this should work. Okay, let's go back to the network tab. Let's clear out all this stuff. Let's try again. See if it actually works this time. All right, cool. Oh, not cool though. It deleted. What? What? Oh, no. Why? Oh, maybe that's completed? Aha, okay. Phew. I thought we had deleted too many things. Yep. So on this particular course view, this student, Mark, had already done lesson 1, so it was showing up as not there. I thought we had mistakenly deleted 2 tasks, and they just happened to be next to each other. But what was really happening is the first one was really done. Okay, so we didn't accidentally delete anything. That's good. We can look at the log. We can see this is what was sent, so that's gone. I do think we probably should have, this is reminding me of why we might have some kind of description telling people what's going on, because what they need to know is that if they are deleting courses tasks here, there's also the possibility that they are affecting real students. Like in this example, right now, there's no visual indicator that lesson 1 here is actually done by that first student, Mark. So if they delete this, in effect, they're also deleting the record that Mark did that work. And that's not great. So I think I need a warning here, some kind of informational panel that says, hey, if you delete tasks, you will also delete any associated student work. All right, I'll be right back in like 30 seconds. I need to get some more water. I'm feeling a little parched. Be right back. Okay, appreciate your patience. All right, so I think where we're at is this now works like I would expect it to. It has the user interface that I would expect. We might want some kind of warning. So I think what I'll do is I'll steal this design from the bulk page. Let's go to the bulk page here, and let's use the same div. Let's plop that right after the header. Okay, and then we can say we'll say note. That feels like the right thing to say. Note. We don't need a second paragraph. If you delete a task from this list, you will also delete any associated schoolwork. And then we can say deletion is permanent. Permanent. There we go. All right, let's see how that looks. Oops, wrong page. Looks off. Something's going on with the spacing there. Yep, there's definitely something weird about the spacing. There's more spacing. What is that? There's margin. Hold on a minute. I need to turn off my flux so I can actually see this. What did I delete from here? Why does that look so off to me? Looks like there's more spacing underneath this than at the top, which I don't know why. Yeah, probably I need to emphasize, you're right. I probably need to tell people, like, watch out. And I'll get to that in just a second. I think I'm just trying, I'm getting, maybe it's this. There's extra margin. No, that can't be it. What's going on? Well, that seemed to be, okay. I guess that was it. So let's, I agree with you, Quatlim. Let's put a span on here with a class of, oh man, my Tailwind knowledge is failing me. How do I make italic? Surely, I don't think it's this. Is that right? I mean, it worked, but is that really the way they... Okay. Cool. Good guess. Maybe... should I also make it strong? Deletion is permanent. I don't know. That's probably too heavy-handed. I'll be a little bit more subtle about it. Okay. Now I feel like this UI is about where I want it. It has a pretty clear note. We've got the list of tasks. There's a definite action at the bottom. Now we need to figure out what we want that action to read as. I think at the bottom I have add, so maybe I'll just change it to delete. Keep it simple. I think I use red somewhere in the app. Let's see if we can find it. There's BG red 700. BG red 500. Yeah, that's probably it. BG. Good question. Yep, it is. You know what that probably is, Ryan? My experience with debug toolbar. Like, look at the number of queries we're doing here. I think there's some there's some exponential problem that seems to happen with debug toolbar. That with the number of queries that you have, that time goes up through the roof. Thankfully, in this particular page, we're querying one course and one set of tasks, and there is a join in there that has to go with the reason why it's so this 5 queries. I probably named them all. One of them is the auth for the user, one of them is probably for the session, one is for the course, one is for the tasks, and one's probably for the grade level that's joining it all together. I might be, oh, there's an account. Okay, I was close. So that grade level was in the join. Anyway, but the fact that there's only a handful of queries here is what leads me to believe that's why debug toolbar is way faster. But I definitely agree with you. Like, it is a shocking burden on a page if you're using it and there's a lot of queries. It gets like really onerous, and I don't know why that is. A better version of myself would go investigate that and try and add a fix, but I don't have the time. All right, let's try this. Let's change the button to be red, make it nice and scary enough. Now it's taking longer to load. Well, you can't see because you can't see my tab, but I saw the little spinner thing. So I guess it's depends. Let's see what the focus. Nope, it wasn't the focus. It was just the hover. Okay. Yep, that's the right. So that's the simple kind of red button that I use. And okay, there's a page. Let's look for some other delete stuff because there is a pattern that I use when I'm like canceling on these things. So let's find some other instances of delete. Let's look at the course task form. Okay. That's what we want to use. Let's put that here. We'll have to fiddle with the spacing probably, but this is probably pretty close to what we want, and then we'll change the actual URL in just a minute. Oh, nope. Good times. Okay. What's going on there? Why did that not work? Flex grow, blah, blah, blah. Flex column. Item center. Well, that's curious. What if I wrap this in a div? because, you know, Flexbox. There's probably better ways to do this. Well, that's not quite right either. Something's up here. My Flexbox is not correct. Ah, that's what's going on. I've got margin top on the button. What am I doing? So weird. Okay, let's move that to the row where it should have been in the first place. And delete it off the button. There we go. That's getting it closer. Let's get rid of that div, see if it brings it back to about what I expect. There it is there. All right, and then we need some padding. So it looks like in the past I've been using margin left 2 on the delete button. So let's add that over here. ML2. So it's going to give, and it looks okay right now with like when you just see the cancel, but it looks weird on the hover state. So now with the hover, you can see there's a little bit of spacing between the two buttons. Okay, cool. So we're really getting close here. We've got our delete. I actually kind of like that it's like straight down, and then you get to the bottom and you get to the satisfying boom, delete. Okay. Let's do a little bit more. Let's change this to be URL. This will be the courses detail view with the course ID is where we want to go back to if somebody cancels. Now we can click that. So now we have navigation back and forth, or they can use the back button on their browser. But that at least gives them the UI option. Okay, what's left? Y'all, we're almost there. There is the really scary possibility that someone might be like, oh, you know what? I'm deleting this and I'm deleting this and let me click the button. Oh no, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, that's the thing that I want to not have to deal with. So this is maybe selfish because not only do I want my customers to have that better experience of not accidentally deleting something, but I don't want the request coming in saying, oops, you know what, I deleted this, can you help me recover it? I know even though we put the note up at the top that says deletion is permanent, people are wishful thinkers and would probably ask anyway. So what I want to do is have some kind of confirmation that that is actually working. So what we're going to do is use HTMX to do the actual posting. HTMX is let me turn back my Flux back on because it's too bright for me. And I appreciate y'all for dealing with my bright white screen. I tried a dark theme, I really did, and I had to give up on it. I just couldn't do it. So hopefully you have Flux on your monitors if you're viewing this late in the evening, like it currently is on the East Coast of the US. But what we want is to change this button. Right now, the button's a type submit. And essentially what I want to do is intercept the button and make it an HX post. And the HX post would be HTMX is a way to do JavaScript through markup, which is pretty cool. And what it's going to give us in this context is the ability to cheaply say, are you sure you want to delete this with an alert? It's the classic like browser alert, which is not the coolest UI in the world, but it is an effective UI. And that's what I'm really going for here. So let's bring up HTMX in case you've not seen it before. And I need to remind myself how this will work. And we'll see what happens. On a submit, so we're going to do a post, but we're not going to swap. I don't want to swap anything. What I really want to have happen is I want the user to be taken to another page. And what I was hoping, and this is maybe the wishful thinking on my part, but back in the view, we have a redirect here. And what I'm hoping will happen is that HTMX will detect the redirect and will actually do the redirect on the client side. We might have to hint that ourselves, but we're going to try it without first. What has happened with my experience so far with HTMX, the author has been very thoughtful about what to include. There have been times where I'm like, I really hope it just does this thing. And then sure enough, it does the thing that I want. So with any luck, the author is detecting for a 302 response. I think that's the status code for redirects. And will actually redirect to the page that's specified. So let's try it. So what we want to add is HX post, because that we're going to take over the button. And the other thing that we need is the HX alert, I think. Confirm. Confirm is what we want. So the confirm is what's going to pop up the dialog that will say, are you sure? Well, this is a good example. Are you sure you don't want to delete? So with any luck, this is like 2 lines, and we'll see how it goes. So let's leave our style up here. We'll leave it as a button with a type submit, and then we're going to add the HX stuff here. So we'll say HX post because we want to do a post request, and then we need to give it the place to post to. And so that is going to be, put it in quotes, because these are HTML attributes that get added. And this is where we want to use the template syntax to say where. So we're going to post to the same page. So I think what we can do is say request path, I think is going to be the right answer. So the request object is added to the context of the page, and the path of this particular page should be that attribute, I believe. And we can check that in a second when we reload the page. But we also want the HX confirm. This is where we're getting the alert box. That is what I actually care about for HTMX here. And now we'll ask the question, are you sure you want to delete these tasks? So I'm hopeful that that is all we have to do. And that would be absolutely amazing. So let's come down here, and before we click the button, we'll inspect this to see what we've got. So you can see that it is resolving to the right place. This is the bulk delete for this particular course, and it's got the confirmation on there. So I think what we can do now is we can try. Right now we're deleting 2. Let's just delete one of these at a time. I don't know how many times we'll have to try, and I want to have plenty of fodder here. So we're going to try and delete less than 14. So let's click the button. Now this is a sign that HTMX is working. I've already hooked it up it's a JavaScript source import. And you can see it's saying, are you sure you want to delete these tasks? Which is what we wanted to confirm. When I click the OK, what we should see is a post request. And it's going to post, it should post with what's in the form. What I don't know what's going to happen is that redirect going to work, or is something else going to happen? So let's try it. Okay. So it didn't work the way that I was hoping, unfortunately. And that's fine. Like, that was partly expected, but I was hopeful. But here's what we posted. And we sent the response, or the request, and we sent the task. That was probably the lesson 14 task ID here. What we got back was the 200 response. Nope, we got a 302. And what HTMX tried to do, oh wow, look what it did. That's funky. So HTMX defaults, I think, to swapping out the HTML that it's in and putting in the response data. So this is actually probably the expected behavior, and it's probably what you want most of the time. So we need to hint. What we essentially did was we shoved the entire page inside of the delete button. That actually looks pretty hilarious to me. You can see that it did in fact delete the task 14, so that's all good. But there's more work to be done, clearly. I think what we have to do to make this work is add an extra header to the response that will trigger HTMX to actually do a client-side redirect. So, yeah, let's go see how that's done. Let's search for redirect. Yeah, here we go. So what we wanted to do, we needed to add this particular header to the view and tell it where to go. Okay, that seems pretty doable. The question that I have is, what's the best way to add that to the response? We're also going to have to work out the error that we saw earlier, which I now know how to simulate by changing the value back on here. We can change this back to on. That was enough to trigger that error. I want to be able to see that it reloads the page with what we expect. It's an error message that should basically never happen, but I still wanted to do the right thing when it happens. So I think the way to set Django's response headers is to actually, we're creating the response redirect, and we can assign it to the response, like a local response object, and then use the response, I believe, as like a dictionary and set a header on there. So let's refactor this a little bit. And if I was good on this, I would test this, but I'm not going to. So we'll say URL equal, and then we're going to pull all that's in here and put it there and fill that in. We're going to use that because we want to put the same URL into the header, the response header. So we need to change this to response like that, and we still want to return this response. That's the right thing to do. Okay, so now though, I think this is where we want to add the HX response, and I think I want to set it to URL. So if I am understanding HX response correctly, and I'm doing this right in Django parlance, we're adding this header back, and it, oops, that was the wrong name. It's not going to respond to that, and we'd be scratching our heads for a long time. So we're telling HTMX, hey, wait a minute, we actually don't want you to inject this HTML into this button that you're in right now. Go ahead and do it. Go to this other place that we're telling you to go to. I think that's how to interpret this. I've never, we're doing this together. I've never done this before, but the documentation seems pretty clear on it, so I'm hoping I'm doing it right. Okay, so let's refresh this page now. So now 14 is gone. Let's try a new candidate. Let's get rid of number 10. I did save the view, so this should be correct if I did everything correctly. And let's do this. We're going to give the confirmation. Did it again. Rats. Okay. All right. Let's check out the network. This is why I didn't want to delete a bunch all at once, because I want to have the ability to try this multiple times. Something went wrong along the way. Could also, I'm also not using the latest version of HTMX. So when did HX redirect get added? It's possible that my version of HTMX doesn't have HX redirect. And that's apparently hard to tell from here. HX no. Triggers a client-side redirect to a new location. So let's look at the change log. Man. News history. Nope. Oh, that's actually like browser history. Sorry, y'all. Where to go? Reference. Nope, this is what we were just looking at. Somewhere he has on here the actual change log. Talk change log. Oh man, I thought it used to be on here. Maybe he moved it to here. Let's see, HX redirect 040. What version am I using? Good question. What version am I using? HTMX. Okay. So I'm using a version that has HX redirect. That much is true. The next question I have is, am I actually sending it in the response? So the thing that I want to try next is to actually inspect the network. So we've got this page loaded. We're pretty confident that, I'm pretty confident that it will send the header, but what else is going on here? So we're recording everything. Let's try deleting 16. Seems like I've got something against even numbers, but I promise I don't. And we've got the post, the response. There it is. Did I spell it wrong? HX redirect, which is going to courses at some spot. Mystery. Okay. Let's search the trusty internet, see if there's an example. Maybe it only works on a get? Ooh, that would not be so cool. You can use HX redirect to trigger a redirect on the client. Okay. HX redirect. It's putting it, all right. That's what we would expect. Oh, I wonder if it has to do with the status code. If the fact that it's a 302. But it is important that the HTTP response containing the redirect is a 200, not a 302. Wow, that is tricky. That is good to know as well. I feel like the documentation might benefit. Maybe it's stated somewhere. Let's search. Let's see if we can find out more about HX redirect. Where did it go? Okay. I wonder. So that person made like a custom response. Oh, I've seen this guy's face before. I can't remember his name. Thomas, yeah. He's actually been a big fan of HTMX. Okay, cool. I wonder if... Now, there's also another project that... TCK3. Good question. I will answer your question in just a moment. I want to check one thing on Django HTMX, but I promise I will answer you in 1 second. Okay, let's see. Did Adam provide something? So Adam is the author of this library, Adam Chains, which is not really his name. His name is Adam Johnson. Yep. But he goes by Adam Chains on the interwebs. And he's got this package to integrate HTMX into a Django app. And I'm wondering if he has anything about the redirect stuff. He does. So he creates a different kind of redirect. I don't know what pseudo mode is. That's curious. I think it's just his example. So he's got a response client redirect. And I bet if we were to look at this thing, it probably has the 200 in there. So let's take a quick peek. Just because we can. It's inheriting from response redirect base. It's the status code is 200. Yep. And it's okay. Interesting. I don't know why he's doing a del on there too. That's curious. Huh. Okay. So I have not integrated Django HTMX. I have done it on a different project, and I've been meaning to do it, but I'm not going to do it tonight. We're running up on a couple hours. So what I'm going to do is we're going to call it a night here. It does sound like we're at this point where if I change this to this other kind of redirect that would do it 200, we would actually get the behavior that we expect, and which is at this point, instead of rendering inside of a giant button here, it would actually do the page and redirect back to the course page, which would close the loop and finish the whole feature off. Sadly, we're going on long enough that I don't want to drag this on and have y'all watch me install that extra package. So we're going to stop there. But I will answer TCK's 3 question here before ending for the evening. So why do I not render an SPA framework? I guess first, for those of you that might not know, SPA stands for single page application. And common SPA frameworks include the likes of, the JavaScript frameworks that you might know and love or hate or be familiar with at least. So React, Vue.js, Ember.js, what are some other ones? That kind of thing. Well, my reasoning for not using an SPA is personal preference at this point. I have nothing against SPAs. Like, I use them at work, they're fine. For a certain size app and a certain level of dynamic behavior, a single page app is a really good tool. For this project, and for my last project, I actually tried this on my last project. My last project was also something that I was making for my spouse. And I wanted to do an SPA because I hadn't really done one before, because I was partly making it for my spouse, but partly learning for myself as well. And I used Django REST Framework. So it was Django with Django REST Framework to make APIs, and Ember.js was the client side. And I'm not gonna knock on Ember.js. It's a really good tool. There's a lot of good stuff out there that's been built with it. It has a long, rich history. What I discovered in my process of using Ember and using an API was that as a person that is a team of one, I was doing everything twice. I would have to, so I would write my Django code. I would write the models, I would write the APIs, the REST API endpoints that I would want to expose the model data. And I was pretty satisfied. That was really quick and easy to do. So no problem there. And also, I'm super familiar and comfortable with Python. So I was right in my wheelhouse doing everything. Ember was the tool that I was learning in this project, which I'll speak on other thoughts there in a moment, but I was learning Ember. But what I found that I had to do in Ember was the client, the single page app, had to have some notion of what that model was. So I would write the Django model, which would be the representation that was really close to the database. And then I would essentially write that model a second time in Ember, so that when Ember did the API calls, it could create JavaScript objects that had the data attributes that I needed. And this is it's a very powerful system. It gives you a lot of capabilities, but I felt like I was doing double work all the time. Every feature that I wanted to do, I'd quickly knock out the Python stuff. I'd be done with the Python stuff in a very short amount of time because that's where I'm super comfortable. And then I'd get over to Ember and I'd just be lumbering, or like I'd fumble around. And that experience, it's not really to Ember's fault. Like, it's just that I didn't want to do the modeling over again. So yeah, you can use generators and stuff, and that's a powerful way. Like, there are all sorts of ways to tackle this, that you can do it and not have to re-implement the wheel. I don't disagree with you at all. And maybe some of those tools exist in Ember.js. Maybe they existed back then, I didn't know about them. But when I was writing it, I was having to do double implementation. And I found that to be maddening. Also, I think from what I ended up having to do as well was consider URL management in a couple of places. So Ember has its own router, but Python and Django also had its own routes. And so I had routes for APIs and routes for Ember. And like, I was having to juggle these back and forth in my head, which wasn't terribly hard. It's not like it's not rocket science, but it was one more thing to manage. And so the combination of this, the difficulty that I had with Ember and its way of testing and using more like bigger integration style test, or preferring that, with a tool called Mirage, and like, again, all great tools, but just not the tools that were right in my toolbox. And it just led me to not resent, but like just see I wasn't making the progress that I wanted to make on that app. With that app, which I no longer run because my wife has moved on to homeschooling my kids, and she doesn't need that. And I also never got it to a point where actually she even wanted to use it. It was so slow going. But when I was still working on that app, I at some point made the determination of like, don't let sunk cost fallacy like take over. I can rewrite this. And so I ripped out Ember and re-implemented the whole app using Django templates, and had something that was as performant as I needed it to be. And I was able to rewrite all of the client-side functionality in like a week. And I'd been spending about a year working on this SPA. Again, I was learning Ember at the same time too. So this is like, I don't know how many times I can say this, but I'm not trying to knock Ember or anybody that uses it. It's a good tool. But it wasn't right for me on that project. That's been my experience. The the other thing I'll add to that, and I think I might have mentioned this last time I streamed, is that there is a really interesting article that I encourage lots of people to read, and it's called why did I choose good question. I think Ember had a lot to, it seemingly had a lot to offer. It seemed like it was the whole package. And, you know, as I've presented here, that I'm very firmly a believer that Django, with its model of offering everything and offering an opinionated take on a lot of things, is a powerful way to go. And so Ember seemed like that. Ember seemed like that for the client side. So that's why I lean that way. I think if I were to do it again and I needed some dynamic functionality and I wasn't using HTMX, I'd probably reach for Vue. But this was also the time frame for this when I started this project. Just for some context, was 2015, 2016. So it was a slightly different world too. JavaScript evolves so quickly. But maybe the final thought that I'll leave people with, that I think I shared last time, but I'll share again, is this. This is a slide representation of this presentation, but there's also the original article. And I read this first as this article by Dan McKinley here. And this is to me, a really powerful article on how to think about projects and how you should think about technology choices. And something that Dan points out in this article, and I think he might have gotten it from this gentleman, Callan, is talking about boring technology. And it doesn't mean boring as then it's not fun to work with. It just means that it's stable technology. It's maybe a slightly better word, to a technology with a history. And the core tenets of this article is that, like, if your objective is actually to get something done, like if you're learning for learning's sake, that's a whole other conversation. But if your objective is to make a project that actually gets something done quickly, then you should be this author suggests you should be very reserved about the choices that you make, and choose technology that is battle tested, and choose technology that you know. And if you do that, what you'll hopefully do is accelerate your ability to deliver on some project. That's what I've done on this homeschool project. I chose Django because I knew it well. I chose things that I knew well because I knew I could deliver on them rapidly, because that was important. The speed of getting something out was important, while my customer, my spouse, actually was interested in me delivering on something. If I had gone too slow, I'm guessing she would have lost interest, because it would have been very similar to my previous app, where I definitely went too slow. So it's interesting in this article to read about that. And I think that the presentation is actually a little bit more entertaining. There's some pictures to go along with it. They're kind of fun. But it's roughly the same content. The other thing of note in this article is this idea of innovation tokens. So I don't remember if he quantifies of how many. Yeah, 3. Okay. The idea here is, like, you should pick boring stuff for as much as possible, stuff you know as much as possible, but you are allowed to deviate from that in certain areas that and what he refers to as innovation tokens, and spend them sparingly, because there's risk with choosing some things that you don't know. But there's also potential value by making those innovative choices. Maybe that's the secret sauce of what your system is supposed to be, is like you see some fusion between certain tech, and you're saying, well, that's what's going to make this app valuable. In that case, go all in on that. Cool. That might work well. But by being reserved about what you're innovating on, it can allow you to focus on your problem domain and not get bogged down by too many things. So what happened to me on my last project is I viewed Ember.js as one of my innovation tokens, because I had read this article But in the experience, I also pulled in all this other stuff that I didn't need. And I got totally bogged down in the details of this. I did way more analytics stuff that I didn't have any customers, and I was doing like in hindsight, it was like, what were you doing? But it was a valuable lesson. And I think if I can tell you anything today, like if you can learn from my lesson, learn from my mistakes, and learn from people like this that have gone through similar things, and you're really interested in like actually producing something that others can use and get value out of, then why not learn from people who have gone down some of the paths? If you're interested in learning about my particular experience, I wrote about it on my site. Here's the link. So this is all about my experience and exactly what I talked to you about, and it details what I tried and how it went wrong and all the tech that I used. And it's kind of comical for me to go back and read it and like realize, man, what was I doing? So anyway, that's probably the parting thought I'll leave you with. I think where we'll go next is perhaps next time I stream. I'm actually out on vacation next week, so it won't be next week, but in a couple weeks from now, we will integrate Django HTMX. We will use the proper redirect. Let's finish off this bulk delete feature and be able to ship it. And then I need to get back to some of the scheduling logic. So the core of my application, which we haven't actually even focused that much on, is that it's all about showing schedules. And my customers have reported, hey, actually there's some scheduling bugs in here where it gets the dates off by one, the infamous off by one error. So I have some deep domain layer stuff to work on that just needs to get done, but it's interesting to like get at the core of like the beating heart of what makes this application valuable, and I want to dig that moat and make it more valuable. So that is what we'll focus on next time. Thank you all for joining in. Hopefully you learned something as we went through this template stuff, learned something about HTMX and all of the technology that I'm using. And if you like this and want to see more, there's plenty up on YouTube. I take all of these streams and post them there, so you can go back and check out past recordings. I do typically stream most Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I can't say every because I also run my local Python meetup, and I'm not actually here every Wednesday every week, but most, probably three times a month or so. And we continue on work on features like this, checking out a Django app. I would appreciate likes, follows, subscribes, whatever platform you're catching this on. Those are always welcome, as I think it helps other people find this. So thanks again, and thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a great evening. Take care.